Okay, today, before we start the meeting, we'd like to just stand and take a moment of silence to think of the shooting victims in Tumbler Ridge, this being our first council meeting after. Thank you. And maybe before we call the meeting to order, Nelson, would you like to introduce our new Deputy Fire Chief?
His first day was today.
Oh, nice. Welcome, Larry.
Take the cold with you.
Well, I think it's cold back there.
Says he finds it warm.
Yeah.
Right here.
Welcome aboard. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 5:32. I'd like to start by acknowledging that this meeting is respectfully held on the traditional territory of the Sycos First Nation, on whose land we live, work, and play. We have an agenda circulated. Would somebody like to move adoption?
Moved.
Seconded? All in favor? That's carried. We have the minutes from the February 9th meeting and the February 11th meeting. Would somebody like to move adoption? Seconded? Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. 4.1, we have the OCP plan bylaw for third reading. Somebody like to move that? Seconder?
Second.
Third. Any discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. Now we'll move on to our delegation. And Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon, this evening, it's feeling like, about our recently completed floodplain mapping project. And I'll just ask Andromeda if you wouldn't mind pulling up the slide deck. I just have a few introductory remarks to get underway and then pass it over to the technical team. First, maybe a quick note about Fraser Basin Council. I think you're familiar with our organization. We are a non-government, not-for-profit organization that works collaboratively with diverse interests, jurisdictions, perspectives, knowledge bases to address really complex, challenging issues. And flood planning and mitigation and resilience is certainly one of those issues, but it's not the only that we're involved in. If you could scroll ahead to 2 slides, please. This project, this floodplain mapping project, is part of a larger national initiative, the Flood Hazard Identification and Mapping Program, led by Natural Resources Canada, and the federal government has collaborated with and cost shared with the various provinces and territories to update and deliver flood maps in higher risk areas. And in the case of the province of BC, Fraser Basin Council has an administrative and coordination role along with the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship. And so we have a role in facilitating the procurement process, in contracting the qualified professional technical teams, in engaging and liaising with communities, and ultimately in sharing the final reports and maps with the local governments and First Nations governments for which they're prepared. The maps can be used for a variety of purposes, land use planning and development decisions, as well as emergency planning, preparedness, and response. And this is one of 7 regional projects that was initiated back in 2022. So this is part of a larger project looking at the Upper Fraser, Nechako, Salmon, and Chilako rivers. And then the next slide shows that there's 4 more projects that have more recently been initiated and will be completed in the next couple of years. And just to wrap up my remarks, I've just got one more slide, and that's to just share the numbers and types of communities and flood hazards that have been included in the scope of work. So a lot of work has been done over the past number of years to improve the quality and currency of our information and understanding about a variety of different flood hazards to inform decisions to reduce the associated risk and increase the resilience going forward. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Andromeda to share their work. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andromeda McIsaac. I am the engineer of record for the Nechako River flood mapping that was done as part of that larger project in the Vanderhoof and Prince George area that Steve was talking about. And we're here to talk through a little of the last pieces of that project and what our final results have been, and discuss any questions you might have at this point. I'm going to keep my own land acknowledgement short into the area that our particular office is on, and then discuss a little bit about the project and our meetings to date, the differences between the 2009 mapping you already have and the 2025 mapping, and a small summary of what it is that we're turning in. So you've already discussed where Vanderhoof is located, but we are presenting from the unceded and ancestral territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations as well, and we acknowledge all Indigenous peoples who've cared for these lands since time immemorial. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside and work on. So I'm going to take a moment and show you this big network that is a project team. I don't want to go into everyone. I just want to point out a couple of things about this. The first is that Rio Tinto Alcannon upstream is a project partner. There's a number of members of our hydrology and hydraulics teams that are specialists, either from UNBC, looking at the Nechako River and reservoir, or looking specifically at ice pieces. And we've had in community engagement and gotten a lot of really important information from our community partners throughout this process. As Steve discussed, we're here today to talk about the Nechako River reach through Vanderhoof, but this was done as part of a larger project looking at the Fraser, Nechako, Chilako, and Salmon rivers around Vanderhoof and Prince George. So here's where we are really here to describe and discuss today, the Nechako River maps and the model extending through the Nechako River District of Vanderhoof area and then downstream into the Bulkley Nechako Regional District. As you can see, the pink represents everywhere that we have modeled for the river, and that goes all the way from one end of the District of Vanderhoof through the other and passes along. Throughout this project, we've met a few times before with some form of engagement from the District of Vanderhoof, sometimes a larger group and sometimes only a couple of people. First meeting was in 2022. We met again in 2023 when we had some preliminary results. And then 2024, we met twice. We looked at some of our draft mapping and our near final mapping, and really to discuss some of the questions that come out of this project and the results coming out of this project. Now, these meetings, this reporting, it all covers a wide variety of technical tasks, but we're really here today to talk about the last one of the set, the final results, that kind of flood hazard mapping that you see in the lower right corner. And we're really talking about what are the differences, what are the key differences between the 2025 flood mapping and the 2009 flood mapping that the district utilizes now. And where do those changes come from? What do they mean? So the short version of this is yes, the 2025 map has a greater extent. And it isn't so much because the last analysis wasn't rigorous enough or didn't have fancy enough computer models. We have fancier computer models and more data now, but really the key difference boils down to a single thing. It's the design flow. And it's because the 2009 is looking at historic information and the kind of world we live in now. And a mandate of the 2025 project has been what is going to happen as we approach the year 2100, what is going to happen as we see climate change, and is there the possibility of increased risk? What might that look like for the district of Vanderhoof? And where might they consider planning or working with that increased risk? So I was a little bit cryptic. I'm going to go through and break down what I mean by that in smaller pieces, and then I hope we'll have lots of times for questions at the end. So first of all,
If I
sorry,
can just
yes.
interrupt for a second, I'm good to this point, but I actually think as we go through slide by slide, why don't we take a pause for questions? Because there's going to be a ton of questions here. And if we get to the end, we're going to be jumping through the presentation. Would that work for you?
Sure. Do you mind if we do them in a little, can I do like 4 slides at a time that are kind of a
For
concept?
sure. As long as we're
Okay.
taking those pauses and not going all the way to the end.
No, that's great. I've marked the spots, so that works very well for me. All right. So first thing we're going to talk about is increase in flow. And where does that come from? So the Nechako River watershed, 60% of it is controlled by the Nechako Reservoir, upstream of Prince George. Oh my gosh, upstream of Vanderhoof, anyways. Sorry, we've got both of them on this map here. So, and that's been being operated by Rio Tinto Alcan, and it has been managed. These have been managed river flows since 1957. That changes flood behavior for the river flows going through Vanderhoof. In a natural flood event, you'd see something kind of like this blue line here. Water rushes in, the flood rushes in. We had a peak flow, it rushes out. What happens instead in a reservoir controlled environment, like the Nechako Reservoir, what will happen is they will purposely pump down to have space or have utilized the water from the previous seasons. So there's open space and they capture that flood event and they hold it for use in the later seasons that are drier, but also protecting against these peak flow events. So you can see you get a very flat line, that is that orange line, and that's storage in the reservoir. And what we're talking about here is a real transfer where instead of all of this flow rushing through at the same time, the reservoir is holding it for later use and they're protecting against that peak flow. And you end up with a hydrograph, kind of like that snip that I show on the right. That's an actual picture from one of the peak events going through Vanderhoof. And you can see instead of being a nice curve up and down, we've got these flat lines. You can see that the reservoir management was trying to hold water to about 450 cubic meters through May. And then during the middle of summer, instead of a natural event where you might have a much larger peak flow, but only peaks for a day or two, Vanderhoof experiences an extended period of peak controlled flow that can last many weeks, upwards of a month or a month and a half. So this is high level what a reservoir does with peak flows. It protects the area downstream. It means that there's less risk involved in having development in what used to be an area that the river utilized often, a floodplain that the river utilized often. And this works really well as long as you can plan, as long as you have some idea of what's coming and when it's coming, and you can make space to manage that water. I want to add one more slide to this and then talk about that, if that's okay with everyone. So the reason that I wanted to include this is because we're no longer looking at a very nice predictive time period and predictable seasons. We just went through 10,000 years of the Holocene. It was great. We knew when summer and winter came. We knew when we were going to have rainy seasons, when we were going to have snowy seasons. We had a very long period of high predictability on planet Earth. And when we look at what is going to happen with climate change to the year 2100, we're not making more water on this planet. We're not getting rid of water on this planet. But what we have now is a system that's where that pattern is breaking down. It's becoming less and less predictable, and we're seeing more extreme climate variation. So that means more severe droughts, but it also means larger floods. You could go from none of your water being there when you need it to suddenly all of it showing up at the same time. So we get double hit here, especially in somewhere with like reservoir management, like Vanderhoof has, well, not only could you see higher peak flows because all the water's arriving in a big spurt, but you might not know when that's coming, and it's a lot harder to do that kind of planning and management because if you had a dry season beforehand, the reservoir is under a lot of pressure to keep some of that storage because they don't know how much water is going to come or when. And then suddenly that whole flood arrives and you just can't capture as much of that volume as you did before. So I'm not saying a specific number is associated with this. I'm saying this is the risk we look to looking forward to the year 2100. Questions?
I think we're good to there.
Okay. All right. Then let's talk about nuts and bolts, what that means for what we've done with numbers on this project. So as we've just established, flows control where the water goes in Vanderhoof. Flows are controlled by two things: changes in the climate and can the reservoir management adapt and control them. So our partners at UNBC and other specialists in future climate change modeling at the Pacific Climate Control Consortium both did advanced modeling of the Nechako Reservoir system, the big snowpack series upstream, and what happens is we have warmer and less predictable weather going into the future. And we have an estimate from PKIC saying that that 200-year design flow that we usually use to make our maps is going to go up by about 20% from PKIC, and UNBC said 40%. We've adopted a value that just we said we averaged the two. It's going to be about a 30% increase. Then we went back and we talked to Rio Tinto, where he said, hey, here's what we're seeing. Here's the data we're getting out of these two sources. What are you able to comment on at this point? And they were able to do some kind of high-level first estimates and say, well, we think maybe we can either compensate for the water going through our reservoir and reduce it, or compensate for the natural sources, that 40% of the watershed that the reservoir doesn't actually control directly, and try to ease that down to maybe a 15% increase in flow. However, they don't actually have that future management plan yet. And we had a number of conversations where they said, oh, we've assumed this, and we've said, okay, how are you going to deal with, maybe still having ice risk, or and little elements like this? And we kept hitting these walls. We're like, we haven't gotten far enough to analyze that, or we haven't gotten far enough into our planning that we can give you an answer for that. And so it was a lengthy dialogue, and it was very interesting. But we ended up rolling back to the point that they don't have a future management plan at this point, and they can't actually provide a value for how much they're going to reduce. And that's not surprising. Their future management plan is underway, but it's a complicated thing to develop. And it's twice complicated in this point because not only are they handling bigger flows, but they need to come up with a way to compensate for that lack of predictability. So for this project at this point, we've looked at what happens if they're not able to manage that 30%. So all of the flows are what we've seen during regulated, but the additional 30% risk is also included in your mapping. And that's what this picture here is. The yellow is that historic flow, which should look a lot like the mapping you guys already have, because when we redid it for, with the extra 10 years of data and our fancier models, we got a very, very similar footprint to what you had before. But then every time you add, let's say you add 11% increase in flow due to climate change, which is still not as much as like Rio Tinto thinks they won't be able to compensate for at least that. So you should see at least that purple increase. Green is for a 22% increase. Blue here shows 30% increase. And each of these is only about a 30 centimeter increase in depth. The problem is that this whole area is very flat, which made it wonderful for development and for moving in. But small changes in depth make for big changes in inundated areas. And this is some of the mapping that we did after our last conversation to kind of show you what these incremental risks might be. Because in some ways, the maps that we've provided today, and my next section will talk a little bit about what the purpose is and what we're turning in. But one of the things we're showing you is not necessarily what's going to happen at Vanderhoof, but what could happen if plans aren't made or new management styles aren't available. Questions?
I have some, but I'll let council. Could we go back a slide then?
You got it.
Okay, so three of us were at a presentation on November 29th, 2024 by Dr. Stephen Derry and Dr. Jingwen Wu,
Mhm.
who are listed on there. And what they told us then is the anticipated increase in precipitation for the far future, which is 2071 to 2100, was on the inside 13% and on the outside 19%. And that's such a far cry from what you give for a UMBC figure that it just makes me wonder how we could be talking even in the same ballpark, right?
You said rainfall specifically?
No precipitation.
Precipitation. I two pieces to that. First of all, Jingwen, like that was some of those members of the same team that were involved in this. But
Yeah.
the other thing is that the Nechako Reservoir and the Nechako watershed are too big for us to just put rain or snow or something on the whole area. It's all of the advanced modeling that they have to do is because snow will fall at different rates in different areas. It'll accumulate at different rates and then will warm and melt at different rates. It gets very complicated very quickly. And I know that we had to do some pretty intense modeling in order to show that, but also what they ran was a number of different projections. And you can see a number of them are based here. I know we have, and I think what we're showing here is an ensemble, but they are a range of estimates, and what comes out is going to depend on how accurate the modeling was of that very complex system and how good the current projection guesses are for how human behavior changes planet Earth.
That didn't answer my question, but I'll go over to Councillor Frankel.
Thanks, Your Worship. So my thought goes to Freshet. And over the last decade, our valley releases its water. It already has released its water this year. So anything that was captured in that valley is gone. Now we're starting to accumulate a few more inches. But over the last decade, that's happened. So that to us is reality. So we're not storing water on the land base. We're actually losing it early. So I wanted to know if that gets taken into consideration into any of your modeling. And then the second part would be as if Rio Tinto, most of the water comes from, 60% of the water comes out of their area. If they have a modification to the release flows or holding capacity of the reservoir, i.e. they can drain to Hats and Narrows and we can go another 3 or 4 feet lower. Does that come into play in any of your models, or is that sort of hypothetical because it's not in the future right now for Rio Tinto?
Okay, two pieces. Easy to answer
Okay.
this, and I actually had a thought related to the last question that I got. I kind of re-listened to it in my head. So you're right, for this one, we don't know what's going on with future reservoir management. We're only able to get estimates for how extreme runoff is going to change or how extreme flows are going to change in this area. And I guess that's one of the big things that I'd like to flag through this project is we're showing what is a risk that could happen, but if infrastructure management and planning can be utilized, you could reduce a whole bunch of that. Unfortunately, Rio Tinto was not in a place yet, because this is complicated management pieces, to show us or to determine how much they can compensate, how much they can use the droughts to compensate for the peak flows or how that will work over time. So I know we're showing you what I would call a worst practical case. It's what if the dam can't compensate for the change that we see or the pressure, the additional pressure. And there is a real possibility that they can, or they can at least reduce it quite a bit from this. The second thing, back to your first question, I realized you said annual precipitation. I wish that the averages for annual were a good representation of what we're seeing in the future. But we see more extreme swing at the extremes than we do in the middle. We see a little bit of changes in our averages year on year. But when we look at what's a typical worst case 20-year or 50-year drought could it be like, that got a lot worse. Even though our annual rainfall is increasing a little bit, our droughts are already nastier and they're going to keep getting nastier. Unfortunately, that's the same for the wet side as well. It goes back to that average amount of water on planet Earth isn't changing. How it arrives and when it arrives is changing. And unfortunately, the droughts make the floods worse as well. When everything's baked and dry and our vegetation can't survive the same way, we don't get the same infiltration into the ground that we usually get. Vegetation doesn't slow down and capture rainfall like we usually would, or runoff like it usually would. And that all that time that we spent kind of cooking our surface hard from droughts means that when we do get water coming through, it's kind of like it's running off of concrete. It moves way faster, it's way less captured, and we end up with flashier, more extreme events. So that's something I find particularly unpleasant about climate change is that the middle point is moving a bit. It's the extreme ends that are moving a lot.
Yeah, I just to reiterate my point on the first question, we're seeing a decade of freshet in February. So we're losing all of that moisture. And so I'm understanding a part of your answer that you have not modeled that.
That's
because
correct.
Okay. So we would look at how do we go about modeling freshet flows into the Nechako in the future so that we know that we lose 20 cubic meters a second or whatever the number is in February, and we're not getting it all in May or June with the runoff out of the reservoir, right? The release out of the reservoir. So there are things, I agree, we all agree that the climate is changing, but part of that is that we're losing our snow base, our freshet, instead of May or June, we're losing it in February or even January. So if your model's still including that in May or June, that's not reality right now for this past decade. We're losing that water in January or February. So it's all good. I know we're expecting more, but somehow we're going to have to look at how to model that in the future, because I think that that's a pattern that is not going to go away, that our winters are getting warmer, we're losing that water, and so we won't see it later on in the year. Thanks.
Yeah, 100% agreed. 100% agreed. And that's where, as a piece, the reason we have this on the slide in this order is just that we can tell from the natural modeling, which neither PECIC nor UNBC has any of the critical information from Rio Tinto about managing their reservoir, what their methodology is, how they make their decision making. All they can do is say, hey, we're looking, and when your water comes, when it won't come a lot of the time, and when it does, it'll come fast. So the next piece is to go in to talk to Rio Tinto and say, hey, what can you say about this? And unfortunately for us, we're at a bit of an impasse where Rio Tinto hasn't set up enough of this or gotten far enough in their own management of the reservoir and their own modeling of the reservoir to be able to look into some of these really important details. And I think practically what you're saying makes a lot of sense. You're going to have more time to capture the water. You're probably going to be able to capture a lot of these peak flows because you'll just have more storage. But when we talk to Rio Tinto and we try to, to hash some of that out, you get kind of bogged down in the details that we don't have as much control over this point. Like they say, oh, we need to release this amount because of ice, but do we have ice in the future? And a whole bunch of other elements like that. So I think in the end, with what we're turning in today, and I can take more questions here, I can show you what I have for that. I think in the end, all we're able to turn in today is a set of maps showing for present day conditions, what are some of the things that you need to see and that you presently experience and might be useful for emergency planning? And for future conditions, what could this look like if the reservoirs can't handle or address the change? And unfortunately, I can't take it any further than that. That's kind of the spot where this pauses, is this risk map that shows you if the reservoir can't capture things, this is where things could go. But the obvious next step, and again, I think we're all in agreement on this, is a totally different modeling, like conversation with Rio Tinto or assessment with Rio Tinto, where they go back and say, we actually control this reservoir. We know what we can do and what kind of operations we need to do. We can look at how our reservoir captures this year round. And this is what we actually see for risk based on that. And my guess is from our conversations thus far, you still see an increase in flow sometimes in these big events, but a lot of this 30% here, a lot of this additional risk that we're showing with these extra colors starts to get captured by management of the reservoir. I just don't have the numbers for that at this point. And I know that it'll be some years before their new operations are out. I do understand that there have been communications with them and that this work is underway. It's just not something that I had, that we had available at the end of this project.
Sounds good.
This is an okay time to finish flipping through my slides?
You betcha.
Okay. All right, so differences in the final mapping, we just talked this through. They're both for the 200-year. There's no climate change allowance in the 2009. There's a 30% one in the 2025, which looks at increased peak flows, but not changes to management on the reservoir. So it's a half picture, if you will. And we have freeboard included, which is the 0.6 meter depth that we always include for the present day standard BC maps. So that's in case there are waves or the debris carried by the flooding, etc. And we're turning in for you guys a report highlighting some of these risks and 2 sets of maps. These first ones are present day maps. They've got 3 colors here. Here's one side of the district. As you can see, the purple is areas that will flood or do flood with more regularity. They're the 20-year flood extents, and that'll look very familiar to you guys. This is a lot of your low-lying and very riverine areas. The mint is a 200-year flood extent. It should look very similar to what you guys already have. It's updated with an extra 10 years of data managed through the reservoir. And it's made in a slightly higher detail because we have some better quality computer models at this point, but very familiar. And then the cream is a 500-year flood extent. And we have these throughout the entirety of the district. As you guys know, in a 20-year event with your dam protection upstream, your flows tend to stay mostly in your river, and it's not until the 200 where you start to get your breaches. But these are the kind of maps that I hope are useful for emergency planning and kind of understanding what kind of risks exist in different places in your district. So those are the present day maps, and the other maps we're turning in as well are the flood construction level maps. These are to that BC standards. They have the 0.6 meter freeboard on top, and these are a snapshot of what the risk could be if the reservoir is unable to compensate. So I'd say this is, yeah, as we discussed, worst case of realism possible. I think this is the maximum risk. But it does not include any of this additional flow being compensated for by being captured by the reservoir. It shows a much broader area. We have the flood construction level value is labeled on the top of each one of these squares, and the lower one shows what the sanitary design values would be, which is that 1 in 20-year elevation. And I have this set of questions. We've been kind of doing them throughout. I know I included this in the reporting, but I'd say this. There are other parts of this project where, the Salmon River, the Chilocco River, they didn't have very good flood mapping prior or had been done many, many years ago, back in the 90s. And we were able to provide something that was clear and direct and what they were going to see in the future. And our recommendation was you should adopt it, you should accept it, and you should plan for your future this way. I would not say the same thing for the Vanderhoof mapping. I think it's really important and it flags a lot of additional risk that you could see in the future. But to me, it feels like a springboard point for the fact that this risk is coming and that there needs to be planning with the reservoir upstream. I hope that the present day maps are useful as they stand right now, and that the future ones open a dialogue and flag a concern. But it's obviously up to every community to decide what they do with their maps and how they adopt them. I hope some of this is useful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe before we go on, could I ask Steve if you could actually comment on that last comment? Because I just want to see, as you're kind of the organizer coming down one step from the province, how you see this being implemented. Because when I look at this, I see as a council, we're presented with this kind of information and then we have a fiduciary responsibility to implement it. But that's not what I'm hearing. So I'm confused as to what my next step would have to be.
I don't know that I have an answer for you. From my way of thinking about it, the flood construction level maps are the professional recommendation of the consultant team based on the best available information that they have. And that includes the assuming the current operations of the reservoir. So from my perspective, that would be recommended to adopt. But Andromeda makes a good point that there is some uncertainty around that. And I think it would be, I could see it being reasonable for the local government to consider other scenarios. We can and will make the model available if you wanted to look at other assumptions. To me, I thought that the consultant team they engaged with Rio Tinto to see if firmer numbers, more certain numbers could be available, and they weren't. And I also followed up with them, and I also followed up with the regulator to see what sort of timeline might different assumptions emerge, and there wasn't one. So it's a tough spot. It's challenging information, a bigger flood extent, deeper flood waters because of climate change, largely, as Andromeda said. I guess I would also say that the maps aren't really the problem. The potential of these kinds of floods are the problem, and the maps are a tool to better understand those and think through, the best path for your community. So I don't know. There's no, from a legislative perspective, there's no requirement for local governments to adopt these or any maps for that matter under the Local Government Act. And you would know better than I, that is fully within your jurisdiction to determine if and how you want to designate a floodplain, what information you use to do so, and when and what information you might use to update, say, an existing flood bylaw.
And there's
In
something
theory,
neat
but my
about.
lawyer might disagree.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
what-
I'm
Go ahead.
I'm just hopping back on you. Sorry, Steve. I didn't mean to leave you in the lurch there either. When we talk about these maps are showing out how does risk change and how does risk change the year 2100, and we've included the 30% in purpose because, as you know, Vanderhoof looks at the next 75 years and makes decisions about where they're going to increase development or put important infrastructure. These maps really do help you look at that risk and understand what could happen and what you might want to consider as you do your planning. How that's implemented is your decision and your right. But we included the 30% for a reason. With our best information, this is a real risk and this is a real concern. And it should be given that weight. I have an asterisk on yours where we say we work with the best information we have, and we know in this case with your guys' area, there is more information or there should be soon. And I wouldn't stop and park this and file it away the same way I would with some of the locations that don't have questions about management.
Absolutely. As I'm sure you're aware, the NE2 project is in pre-feasibility right now. So probably within a 5-year timeline, we'll have a lot better idea of what that will mean to actual reservoir management.
Yeah. And I know through FBC, all of these, the models that we've developed will be available. I don't know, technology changes so quickly, but we did make and calibrate very carefully a set of river models for your whole section. And if you have an idea of what these flows are or what they could be in the future, these models will be available and you could just take those, put in your new values or what you think your values might be,
Mhm.
and look at how that changes some of those extents. So we are leaving behind more than a set of maps for you. We are also leaving a set of tools.
I appreciate the information. And so, I mean, better than most in the province, this council understands its backyard, understands the river, understands the partner and what the partner's doing with the river. So what I see with this information is that it is puts us on a route of advocacy, to work with our partner, to look at what we can do, also to put in some of those parameters and those assumptions that we've noticed. And again, we were involved in a climate change assessment back in 2007, so that data can be used as well. Maybe you've already looked at it, but we can utilize this information in a different way now that we have it in front of us, and we can use it to ask to run some more different models based on an early freshet, based on more holding capacity, based on the power generation stuff. So to me, I'm shocked. I was going to make a joke and say I couldn't see the town under that blue shade there, but I think that just gives us more information, Andromeda, to utilize, because I think we need that to advocate for ourselves, and we do a pretty good job of that. So appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, just a couple of points just before we leave. One name I didn't see on that team was Lyle Larson, and I would encourage, if you're doing things on the Nechako or the Fraser in the future, flag that as a name of somebody that should be brought in. Lyle knows he would be the first person we call with any water event. So I would encourage that. Second one was just the community engagement, and I know you've heard this from me before, but not happy with that community engagement. That when you look at the faces around the table here, there's a number of us that live, breathe, and sleep this, and I could have been a real asset, I think, to the process. So I would encourage to engage councils and not to exclude them purposefully in the future planning.
Definitely noted, Mayor. And we have had a number of conversations with our provincial and federal colleagues on that sort of lesson learned in terms of don't treat this exclusively as a technical exercise and engage only staff, but be open to communicating with, liaising with the elected leadership and the decision makers of in terms of applying this kind of information. So thank you for that.
Okay, well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your meeting.
We will.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
I want to say this.
In with them, but it just irks me how, okay, there's other answers that make us feel a little better about how this can be portrayed, but it's up to us now to portray this, or not portray it, but explain to the public how this isn't as scary as we initially thought it could be. And I don't know if that's fair in the process. Anyway, it bothers me.
I agree, and maybe
How do we,
telling anybody to make a motion, but if somebody wanted a motion, make a motion that we ask them to come back and do maybe a public open house, and they can explain that to the public. I don't think it's our job.
neither do I, and I just feel it's been dropped upon us, and here it's a tool for you. But I know there's a reason why folks were here tonight, because of the concerns that they had, right? And so how do we get the message out that, you know, there were some good points that were brought up that allowed them to say, these are our tools and there's other information that, you know, we can understand how this isn't maybe as bad as we initially thought it could be, but otherwise it just looks like we're trying to argue against data. And I don't like that. It's not, anyway.
Absolutely not. And the point of this isn't necessarily how it's going to be and you don't have to implement it. I don't think that is true. I think a lawyer would
Yeah.
tell you you're crazy if you did that. So I think we need some guidance from the province as well on this, on what that looks like. This is their process.
Mhm.
They don't feel that that's necessarily cast in stone, and where should they go with that?
Yeah.
Councilor Vandola.
Yeah, thanks. I think the concerning piece for me was that in our meeting in September of 2024, we specifically asked them to work with RTA to come up with a unified plan. And they said that, yeah, we were going to get together, but they didn't have their reservoir management plan completed, which I think is ridiculous because there's 70 years of data there that they could have easily tapped into. And then they seemed like they were kind of semi-oblivious to the Me2 project or the Tatsa Narrows project, which will significantly change reservoir management. And we didn't hear any of that, you know, so for me, you know, how do you go from, you know, the one entity, you know, Rio Tinto said, yeah, we can manage it to 15%. And then we got the other entity saying 20, and then UNBC at 40, like that's from a professional group providing data that's so wide ranging, that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. This is the worst kind of report.
Right.
Like where they don't necessarily believe in it themselves. Like they
Well,
believe in
that's
it from a
just it.
certain point of view, but not on a general. I will be touching base with Rio Tinto if their bots haven't already picked up on the conversation when it goes on our website.
Yeah,
Watch
yeah.
the meeting already.
Good.
Any other comments before we? Okay. I'm sure we'll be discussing this in a lot more meetings to come. Okay, CAO reports, business license amendment bylaw. You speaking to this, Willeen?
This is a very brief amendment to the business license bylaw. It's just to bring the dates in line with our new software, which many other municipalities in the province use, and we would be an outlier if we didn't change our dates to January 1st to December 31st. So that's all it is. It's for 3 readings.
I'll move.
We have a seconder? Any questions? Councilor Lozay.
I'm just wondering, this isn't going to impact like the cost for the businesses that already have a license in place? No, how's that?
No.
No, but I don't, from when I spoke to the chief financial officer, there's going to be a little bit of an overlap. So they
Okay.
won't be getting reimbursements for what they've already paid, but it'll just start again.
3 months.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's 3 months of,
Any other questions? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, 6.2 NDIT airport trim pads.
yes, that's me.
Leave your mic on.
This is just to approve a grant application to NDIT for the airport turn pads fund or project.
We have somebody to move it? Seconder, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, 6.3 Work BC fee waiver request.
So this is Work BC has their job fair at the arena every year, and every year they have to apply for a fee waiver because staff don't have the authority to waive the fees in a bylaw. So I would like to recommend that you approve the fee waiver request and that future Work BC job fairs held at the Van der Hoof Arena have the fees waived. So we don't have to come back every year. If that's council's wish.
Somebody want to make that motion?
I'll make.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Okay. We have council priorities there. I hope everybody gets a chance to read them every meeting, just to make sure we remind ourselves of what our goals are and how we want to get there. 8.1 correspondence. So this came in a little, got lost in my email somewhere, so we're a little late on getting it than what we should have been. But it is a call to action where they're reaching out to all local governments to engage with the Battered Women's Society and look at gender-based violence and what can be done. And it's not, the idea is not to be a cookie cutter, but to see what is appropriate for your community and how you can move things forward. So Lozzie.
I'd like to move that we invite a delegation from this organization to come and present.
Great. Do we have a seconder? Any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Councilor items. Let's start with Councilor Frankel. Oh, sorry, I thought I turned you on.
I'd like to give my time to Councillor Lozay because I have nothing to speak to.
Councilor Lozay.
Wow.
February 11th, I attended the community forest meeting, and I was just very excited after that meeting, talking, because I have been a proponent of selective harvesting for a while, as much as I know about it. And I think that this commercial thinning project that they're working on is very exciting and very sustainable. And so I just wanted to comment on that. That came out of the meeting for me. Just really, really awesome to see the direction that our partners are going. On February 17th, I attended a community forum hosted by the Omineeka Safe Home Society to share information about femicide. And they're wanting to establish a municipal gender-based violent task force as one of the 5 actions brought forward by the Battered Women's Support Services to end femicide that we just voted to invite to our meeting. I think it's very important, and it'll be very informative and something that's important for our community. And I do like it that it is not a cookie cutter, as you said, but it is something that responds to our community. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Young.
Just want to report on the CNC advisory meeting that the mayor and I attended. It's much like a few of the other meetings we've been attending in the last year, where we're hearing a lot about things that are basically revamping their philosophy around how they're supporting us as a community, in my mind. And I think it's really good. There's a lot of movement in that area. And once again, we kind of went around the table and heard about some perspectives and how they've changed and really focused on trying to bring things that meet our needs. So it's exciting, especially in the areas of trades. There's still some limitations, of course, with the building and some of the things that they can provide. But I know there's, the trades discovery, which is a real entry level type of learning course that's available for adults as well as some of our SD91 students, which I'm quite excited about. They're talking about doing maybe industrial mechanics soon out of that space, which is a bit of a stretch, but because of the type of environment, but I think it's going to be exciting to see that there. And also just even how to generate more understanding of the possibilities. This has been an ongoing conversation so that they can generate that interest, so they can in turn then offer the courses, which then legitimizes the whole process where we create this cycle that's going to be ongoing, because it seems like we're always starting up things. So how do we have some longevity to it? Some other programs are being rolled out locally, but there's more interest. And I'm not going to name a whole bunch of specific ththings. I know the mayor took better notes than me because I was having a technical issue with my pen at the time, and I only get about half of the things they're saying, which is bizarre, but that's the case. I'm excited mostly, and I think maybe Mayor can agree or disagree, is is the change, like I said earlier, in philosophy. They're coming back to us many times to say, we want to hear more about what's needed, be responsive more to the change in industry and what industry is asking for. We've heard all these things before. I do feel there's a real intent right now. I guess maybe I'm just trying to be optimistic, but I do feel that's there. They've listened more about the need for health training. They keep bringing that back up when we're there. I don't believe it's because they want us or they believe that's what we want to hear. I think there's an intent. Now, I think for us, we have to continue then. It's not the people that come and speak to us. It's like many other opportunities. We have to continue to put pressure outside of that level to say, these things are being promised or suggested and these meet our needs. We need to follow up. So we need to have folks continue to put the pressure on so they can follow up and that funding to follow, to make it follow up. There's also the talk about adjusting the requirements for butts in the seats to make sure it's more responsive to our needs. Because we remember we talked about this in the past about they wouldn't fund certain not CNC, but others wouldn't fund programs unless they had X amount of people to fill the seats. So being more versatile in that area, to me, that's an exciting thing because that limited us before. They're not making promises there, but they're hearing that conversation more. So I left that meeting thinking, okay, we've heard a lot of this before, but they're still saying it. So that's a positive. I'm not going to say, oh, we've heard this before. We've told them that too.
Yeah.
So, and they did say that. Yeah, we know you've heard this message. So I'm going to ask everyone to stay optimistic because I think right now, at least they're listening. So that's a good thing. Now we'll just put more pressure. That's it for me.
Vandola.
Yeah, thanks. On Wednesday, I joined the Blackwater Gold Community Liaison Committee meeting. Really great news from on productivity down there. They were able through 2025, they mined 192,808 ounces of gold with an average price of $4,100 an ounce. So quick math's kind of just about 700 and some million, which they took in, which is one of the reasons why they're advancing on their phase 2 operations to create another mine adjacent to the one they have. And so their productivity is, up 88%. So they're pretty happy with how that's going. Most of the meeting was going over the community engagement management plan and just some of the updates they're doing there to be more aligned with the environmental assessment certificate number 37, kind of make all those pieces relevant. And then kind of the last thing that I got reelected as the co-chair again. So I'm still going to be managing that file. On Saturday, I joined the Nechako Valley Cattlemen's AGM. Pretty interesting. Of course, what some of the challenges they're facing is they have record prices for cattle. And then one of the a backside of that is they got record prices for cattle, which makes it difficult to increase your herds. Are kind of working on kind of 3 main issues as an organization. The bedding shavings is a huge issue for them. The drought expected for this summer is a big challenge. And then they talk about the BC Hydro twinning project is going through so many of the properties of their folks and how that's impacting those individuals. They talked about Mike Pritchard talked quite a bit about the shavings and the income that they received. This last year, they took in about $268,000 from shavings revenue. And they've got loads out at Philpott's mill there to be ground up. The problem is they've got 86 loads, and which is going to cost them to hold that volume is about $172,000. So they're looking for financial support. And they're looking at Fourth Enhancement Society, BC grants, and looking at other agencies to see if they could get some funding to kind of give them some relief there. Wayne Ray, the chair of the Fort Fraser Cattlemen's, gave a bit of an update. One of the challenges he sees in going forward, especially on the agriculture or beef cattle industry, is that the ag lease program is dead. And he brought forward that the reason that it's dead is because of the new DRIPA legislation, and that Crown Lands Division is not going forward on issuing any ag leases because of the impacts on on the reconciliation piece and this, and just the complexities of consultation and whatnot. So that file is kind of gone. Lots of, on the, damage, in the area, lots of elk issues. You just don't realize how much elk damage is occurring and one of the challenges that, Cam Hill brought up, in his, kind of, presentation is that, the amount of money, on fencing that they get, to keep the elk out in BC is about $7 per capita. The state of Idaho is $65 per capita. So they're trying to so, what gives there, right? And one of the things they're looking for is fence posts. And so after is a get together, they're looking for, and they need to be a tall post. They got to be 12-foot high posts. And so they're in real need of these fence posts. And I asked him, I said, well, we're in the process of doing commercial thinning where we could have maybe a product line that we could set aside that may not necessarily have to be ground up on site or sent to a bioenergy facility. It could be maybe utilized for posts and rails. And he thought, well, that'd be something they'd be quite interested in if there was a product line that we could provide them to create these fences that they're needed to keep these damn elk out. So it was interesting. Another interesting piece is on the life.
They talk about the numbers in the herds that are around here right now.
He did. He just said that the challenge is the herds are increased, and Cam's also ex COS service. They're talking about, is there an ability to change the hunting regulations a bit to maybe allow for a dose or a cow season, right? Because it's not the bulls that they see as the problem, it's the cows, because they're just producing so many more calves, and so now we just expanded the elk herd so much, it's just creating almost hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage,
And I think it'd be interesting for us to find out those numbers, because if it's going to continue to increase at what, it'd be nice to graph that out, because that's also going to tell you how much more need you're going to have for those fencing pieces and everything else.
Yeah, for sure.
I know a couple of these properties fairly well that have a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's just one area, and I don't know what's like elsewhere, but
It's a hard hit area.
yeah,
it's a large area.
it is. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that he brought up was the livestock protection program and the kind of the losses that the farmers are facing by predators. And the number one critter that does the most damage and kills are ravens. And I was shocked to hear that. Ravens. I was ready to hear grizzly bears, black bears, wolves. And he said, yeah, they had 2 grizzly bears that were identified in kills and 4 black bears. And they said then they had way more raven kills and more raven kills than any other location in the province. So it's something funky going on with the ravens. I don't know. So anyway, I found that extremely interesting. And then John Rustad came and gave a bit of a spiel. Mostly talked about, the budget being 13.3 billion deficit and really pushed the issues that he sees going forward from the Cowichan case in Richmond on the private land delineations. And so he was really focusing on that. He also indicated that because of the $13.3 billion deficit, that currently in BC we have 17 mines and 2 pipelines in the works, and if we could get those approved, that deficit would get dropped substantially. Was his comments, and of course, kind of the last message he had was that reconciliation must have an end date. Is what he said. So that was the news to noon from the cattlemen there. That's it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of other issues. Councilor Bowman.
So on the 10th of February, I met with both the Nechaka Valley Exhibition Board and also Diadem Promotions. This is all regarding our 100-year celebration, what they can all do for us, and I'll have a full report at our meeting tomorrow night for that. I was at the 11th meeting too of the Community Forest Update. Councillor Lozay covered that just fine. Budget meetings, of course, been going on as well. On the 14th, I took in the Northern Tech event hosted by the Nechako Nordics at the Sporting Association grounds. Wonderful. It was a beautiful day and there were so many skiers out. I think it was a record number at that time. On the 19th, I attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting. And we had a really interesting presentation from Dr. Wayne Selesky on the Nechaka white sturgeon and tourism in this town. And he was really taken by the train lady. I guess the last time around, she brought like 42 people into our town. He's been talking to her and he's going to get it organized even more. And he had some renditions, he used AI to create the renditions of our park there on the highway where you could have a giant sturgeon there for people to stand and get their picture took in front of the giant sturgeon, and a little park where the train could stop there and let people off on the south side instead of the north side so they could come to the park and enjoy everything that's there. There was some pretty interesting stuff there. It's stuff that was kind of brought up last fall when we attended that meeting on economic development in town. The sturgeon did come up a lot. And so Wayne brought his take on it, being a guy who's really involved with the Sturgeon Center. Also, the Chamber of Commerce's AGM, get ready to take that in on the 9th of April. Still planning for the July 3rd parade. They want to use the same route as usual. They're working on a Women's Day coming up on March the 7th. And I should remind everyone that if you haven't picked up your tickets yet, this Saturday night is the Business Excellence Awards. It's great support right now. How many tickets have sold to date, Shelley? So it's doing well. We've got good support on that. And then to end mine off, I just went and judged the science fair at Sinkit View the other day with a whole bunch of young scientists. And that was brilliant. That's me.
Thank you. Councillor Martins.
Thanks. My report's not very long. I attended that community's forestry meeting as well. Kind of glad to see that movement starting there. That was exciting, like Councillor Lozay said too, for sure. As far as the 100 Club update, that's moving along too. As everyone knows, we have a meeting tomorrow night. I've asked staff, Wayne was going to put together a checklist for us, just kind of where we're at with everything. And I think she'll probably have them printed off for us tomorrow. We'll all have a copy of it. And that's something we can take with us and add to that, you know, things that need to be done before this event happens. It's, you know, we can add, I'll send her a few more things tomorrow. I think that should go on there too. But just to give us a bit of a chart of where we are with the whole process. It's moving. We've got lots done and we have still lots to go, but it seems to be moving really good. So I'll have a few things to add with that tomorrow. And I wanted to just, for the time it takes to thank the fire department and the new fire chief there with Fraser Lakes Fire last night. I thought it was very, you know, whoever decided, obviously probably the mayor as well, but to go help those guys, I think it's kind of pretty neighborly. I know nothing about it. I don't know any details. I don't pretend to know. I thought it was good for Vanderhoof to help them. We're the biggest community within an hour of Fraser Lake. So just hats off to you guys for sure for doing that. So yeah, that's it for me.
All right. Was at another one of these employee engagement sessions on the 10th. I really enjoy them. We're getting some really good data out of them, and I look forward to sharing that at the end. One of the great things we're having too, and it just goes on to that meeting with CNC, Ken, is that we've got Anna and Aaron attending all of those. And that is so good because when issues come up, they say, well, would this help? And we could adapt this and not do like the full course version. We could do a community version of it over here. And I look forward to how can we make that continue in the future. I'm assuming this is going to be successful, where we bring CNC, our partner, in and see where we can make those, draw those connections and what would help throughout. So absolutely, yeah, yeah. We reported on the COM4 field visit at the community forestry meeting, but again, that is exciting, and the three of us on the Natural Resource Committee have gone and looked at 3 different operations on that, and it'd be interesting to bring that together and look at what we think is a real fit there, bring that to the board at some point and move that forward. RT Community Leaders Meeting, snowpack is at 103, and Blue Lake, which isn't in the sort of Fraser Lake, Notley watershed, it is on the other side of the mountain. That gives an indicator of it, is only at 87%. So anticipating we're going to have low conditions again this year. It was looking good early on, but they've got some more snow around the Burns Lake area now, but they were almost exhausted 2 weeks ago when I was there. So bracing for that low water conditions. Yeah, I was at the Nechako Nordics meet too, and that was the most attended meet they've had. So that was grazing. It was a beautiful day for it. There were some fools out there in t-shirts.
I noticed one.
Awesome. I too was at the 5 actions against femicide. I'm glad we're bringing that forward and bringing them in as a delegation. Always interesting. There was a lot of uptake there, but a lot of the same organizations that are there for everything, right? So how do we make it meaningful for our community without, overtaxing everybody as well? So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. And again, not being a cookie cutter, but what works for our community. I was also at the Cattlemen's. Interesting, just to add to what our MLA talked about, he started off with a lack of electricity and what a problem that is, and then went on to needing to open mines and LNG facilities that are just energy gluts. So interesting, right? That the two sides don't sort of meet there in what he has to say. I too do want to give a shout out. Nelson, please give the fire department our thanks. We sent a crew of 6 as well as an engine, and good to see that helped to our neighbors there. Really feel devastated for Fraser Lake. That's a huge loss. And looking at if commercial retail buildings will get built like that. They cost so much more to build than what you can ever get out of rent in a small community that it's very worrying. Okay, that's my report. Does anybody have any questions for anybody?
Good question. I've heard Councillor Lozay talk about, this commercial thinning, and if I reach out to Clucas Lake operator, maybe we can do another field tour and take a few more people. Instead of our operation up here, we can go take a look at one that we kind of looking at. So he's back. We should figure that time out. So we'd love to take everybody out for a tour now. Even if we can't find that one at Clucas Lake, or if they're not there, we should just go and walk out there.
Yeah.
Machinery will be gone, but we should go walk through there so everyone understands it. Yeah, Norm Holtz is on the other side of the highway, so that's a good one to walk through too. So just thought I'll work on that.
Absolutely, but if we do go out to Clucas Lake, we should make sure we take our partners at Cycas as well. Awesome. And with that, Natural Resource Committee will be meeting with Cycas on Friday along with some staff. So forward as well. Good. Well, with that, I declare us adjourned.